Okay,
Hi.
you're live. Hello. What's up, Facebook?
Oh,
Awesome. So, how's it going? It's Monday.
it's Monday. It's a little busy. I'm back at the office, so uh it's nice because you get I don't know. I guess I miss being here. I'm here by myself so much anyway, so it doesn't really matter. But
Yeah, it's like your own personal
yeah,
little office.
space. Yeah. And but it is busy. Like there's a lot of stuff going on. I'm
Yeah.
really looking for a floor person, a wood restoration floor person. Can't
Ah,
seem to find somebody. So I found two companies that were recommended, so I'm gonna call. But it's been because we have such a large real estate investor community. Like it's been interesting. Like a lot of people don't really know or haven't restored wooden floors, I guess.
I don't think there's a lot of wood floors still like kind of viable here
Right.
in Phoenix. I guess
Unless it's
seen a few of the historic areas,
uh
but typically I haven't seen any floors that were salvageable.
right. And we don't. But this particular little house that's out in Mesa, for the most part, all of their floors are really, really cute. So not I shouldn't say cute. They're in really good shape and
Yeah.
they add to the obviously the look of the property. So we want to keep them. We'll see how that goes.
Well, that's exciting. So, new project with lovely wooden floors. So, if
Yeah.
anybody out there knows a restoration company, please drop it in the comments
Yes.
because we're looking for that.
Yeah. It would be great to have that as a resource for sure.
Excellent.
Yes. How are you doing?
Pretty good. Pretty good. So, it's Monday. I've now had it in my planner for 5 or 6 weeks that my goal, I use the law of attraction planner, so it has you set goals, that my
Mhm.
goal is routine and consistency. So I feel like I can check mark that off because we're being very consistent here. So that makes up for my inconsistencies elsewhere.
That's a good way of looking at it. Oh my God, that's funny.
Yeah, I choose to look at it that way. So that's where I'm at.
No, that's good because you have to get your wins somewhere
Great.
somehow.
You do. You do.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So today we said we were going to talk about qualifying sellers, right?
Yes, qualifying sellers,
And
which has
actually,
always been fun.
I do think that I think that goes well with my whole goal setting that I'm talking about because I feel that qualifying sellers should be probably a business goal. I know it's a business goal that I should have started working on a long time ago. um,
Yeah, I think all of us. I mean, we all kind of. It'll be interesting to talk through this, but I think we don't know that we should. Some of us don't know about qualifying sellers until we're in it.
right, right, totally. So I think we've had a similar experience where we both got started wholesaling, and being that wholesaling is basically a numbers game. Would you agree? So you've got like lots of leads, hopefully, that you're
Yes.
working on at one time. And in our case, we work leads that are more time sensitive usually because we work a lot of foreclosure leads. So they do cycle through over some time, but more or less, we've got a large number of leads at any one time that we're working on. And the idea is that you want to make contact with enough people in order to get interest back, and you want to talk to the folks who say, okay, I like what you're offering and I need your help. And I feel like we inadvertently, especially when we're new to wholesaling or real estate investing, I feel like we inadvertently get stuck in this space of feeling like not only do we need to work every lead, but every seller that comes back to us and initially says, I would like some help, or I would like to sell, or whatever they're saying to you, that we feel like we have to take that to fruition every single time. Would you agree?
Right. Like there's some sort of responsibility that we have to them in order for us to make it work, which is not a good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think there's a couple things at play. So I think, like you said, so of course, the minute that somebody says I'm in trouble and I need help, and I'm interested in how it is that you can help me, you immediately start to feel obligated, right? And you go, okay, so my job is to solve problems, and this person needs help getting their problem solved. So let me go ahead and see this through. And there's nothing wrong with that being the intention, obviously. So when we talk about qualifying, we're not necessarily talking about cherry picking. There's a difference, and I think we'll drill down on that.
Yeah.
So there's that obligation feeling, right?
Well, that and the excitement, right, of it.
Yeah, and the excitement. Okay,
yeah.
Here we go, right?
Yep.
Because
exactly.
it's, again, so time sensitivity. You've got a new problem to solve. And some of us might thrive a little bit on the adrenaline of, here's a problem that needs to be solved, and it needs to be solved under pressure.
Yes.
So yeah, so then you get into that where it's like, intellectually, I want to solve this issue, right? And you have that driving you. And then I think there's also some, especially if you're newer, and you don't necessarily have multiple sources of leads, or you're not working multiple streams yet, where you feel like I need every deal that comes in from a business standpoint.
Everything is an opportunity, so obviously we're just you're reaching at some point, and that's not good.
Yeah. So all of those things, I think, put us in a position where instead of necessarily looking at everything objectively and saying, what components are there to this problem? Does everything look like it's solvable? And if it does, on top of that, the person that I'm dealing with, because like we can't just take it and run with it ourselves. That would make things so much easier, right? If a seller could walk in the door and somehow go, okay, the whole thing is yours, I'm hands off, and just tell me what I need to sign. Like that would make life really, really easy, but almost no transactions work out that way, right?
There's like 1 in 100, I think. 1 in 50. Yeah. Where that actually.
Yeah. So the majority of the time, you've got like layered things that you're like dealing with. So I think that all of those things lend us to the space where we are taking on every single thing that comes to us. We're trying to make it work. And in the beginning, we're not necessarily looking at, is this a good deal for us? Is it a win-win on both sides? All the different things. So I think we need to sort of look at what are we looking at? What are we looking for when we want to qualify a seller, and why do we need to qualify a seller?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it touches back on the last FB Live that we did in regards to some of the sellers that we were dealing with, particularly on my situation. That should have been something that after the title report came back, we could have just let it go. But again, because of that commitment and the kind of responsibility that you feel towards somebody or a seller, it's not necessarily a good thing. So there's a lot of, I think in the beginning when you start doing the wholesaling thing and you do get excited. You don't think about the formula that maybe somebody had actually shown you before that you might want to look at to run your numbers.
Right.
How much do you want to make? And then go into, so there's like it's like the right brain, left brain, right?
Right.
So you look at the numbers and all of that, you have all of that kind of data that you have to go through, but then you also have to go through the emotional side of things and whether or not you want to go through a roller coaster or not.
Yeah. And not only is this something that affects us on the business side of the transaction, right? When we're the ones offering help, but potentially, it's also affecting your seller, because if you can't, if you're not able to do what you thought you were able to do, or even if it just comes down to like a fundamental not being able to get along with the
Right.
seller, you're not doing them any favors and they're not doing you any favors.
Right.
So, there's a lot of things I think to consider. So let's kind of think this through. So when we get someone who comes to us and says, "Oh, I received your marketing, I received your letter, or however it is that you contacted them," and they said, "Here's my situation, and this is what I need." I think we talked about this a little bit in the last episode, where one of the things that we want to start being aware of is red flags,
Right.
right? So when we're first having conversations with the seller, because the first thing that we're going to do is say, okay, tell me about what's going on with the property. Tell me about what kind of thing you're looking to do, right? Because some people contact us and they don't necessarily want to sell, but they're looking for another way out, right? Or they're looking
For their
for,
option.
yeah, they
Right.
want to know, what are all my options? I don't understand. So
Hmm.
you may not even be having a conversation at first about selling the property, but you are gathering information at that point, right?
Yeah.
So during the information gathering period, I think that that's where you kind of start your qualification, like getting an idea of how easily you communicate with the seller, is one thing that's huge. One of the things that I've realized in my transactions that didn't go the way that I would have hoped, and where I later on had realized, when we're partway through the transaction, that maybe I didn't really want to work with this person and now I'm stuck. There were always things that were red flags in the beginning for me.
Yeah.
um, so I think that is really important to note. um, so in that very first conversation, if you're not getting along, and so as I think you'll remember an example of this. Actually, this is funny. So Angie had to step in and help me with one of my deals, because I had a seller that was really difficult, and he and I did not get along. And this was kind of a complicated this is kind of a complicated deal. I was actually purchasing the seller's mom's home, and she at the time was in physical therapy rehab. She had just had some surgery, and she was going to be in physical therapy for some time. It was going to be like a couple of months, and they were in foreclosure.
Yeah.
The family had known already that when she finished her physical therapy, that she wasn't likely going to be able to go home. With the surgery that she had, she was going to be wheelchair bound. It was a 2-story condo. There were some things, right? And so the son is who I ended up dealing with, and there were many red flags here. So while he was being a responsible son, he was also, yet again, you'll find this is a theme, he was a drug dealer.
Yeah.
And so he kind of had an interesting attitude. He was pretty flippant about the whole foreclosure. He wasn't ready to accept that we were on a pretty strict timeline, and that there were things that had to be done in a certain way, and that they had to be done in a timely manner. And so he
Yeah.
did a lot of things like set appointments and then not show up, or set appointments, and he also didn't have a car, despite his apparently thriving business. Um, he had no transportation. So often when we would set an appointment to get something done, one of us would have to go to him and he wouldn't show up. And after this happened to me a couple of times, I let him have it. And I basically said, look, you're wasting my time. I've got other things to do. This is a business. I don't have
Yeah.
all day to wait around on you. because I have other clients that I need to help and that I have appointment with, and he didn't like it. He he thought that I was uptight. Um, he,
Oh,
he
yeah.
didn't understand. Yeah, he like flipped out about the fact that I was uptight, but he didn't understand my side of things. That this is my career, right? This is what I do for a living. So I'm booking all these business transactions, and he's like, when he says he'll show up at 4 o'clock, sometimes he'd show up at 6:30 and then call and go, "Why aren't you here?" Like I'm supposed to wait in a parking lot for 2.5 hours for him to show up somewhere to sign a piece of paper. So
Yeah.
so he and I ended up having some major conflicts, and it was in the middle of the transaction, and it was to the point where we'd done so much work that it didn't make any sense to just cut off the transaction at this point. We also felt that sense of obligation that Angie and I were talking about a minute ago, right? Because the whole thing is, this woman who is in physical therapy and has had major surgery and has had major health issues needs to get out from under this situation. And her kids are not necessarily the most responsible people, but they're the only
Yeah,
people that we can deal with.
exactly.
So what
And
do
I
we do?
Yeah, I think because I know that after you guys had a little bit of a spat, I guess I'm gonna call it. um, I know that I said, and I am the nicer one in the group. I'm known for that. So
Yes.
older folks, people that are super super hard headed, um, or just horrible to deal with sometimes. I do have that tendency of they're okay with me.
Yeah.
After a while, I think it's because I give them a lot of rope, and then in the end, it's like, okay, now just
Yeah.
I've given you a ton of rope. Now it's time for you to kind of reciprocate. Um, and with him, I remember waiting at the Domino's parking lot for him for because it was behind the. I don't even understand why. Because I think he didn't want us around the condo because I think some of the dealings were happening or something. I don't know.
Yeah,
And
I'm
I could
sure.
care less. Like the things how I grew up. I didn't grow up in the ghetto or anything like that. But yeah, I saw things, and come on now, like not.
And we've
Yeah.
seen plenty
So
just in
yeah,
our real estate career. Like we don't, and you know what? I think we had that conversation with him. Like, we don't care about your business. We care about our business. We're just trying to get this done. You do what you
yes,
gotta do.
yeah. And he turned out actually to be really funny. Like he God bless him. But it was like this, it was like taking care of like your little brother almost. That had a horrible ADD and a drug problem. It was like, that's what it felt like. I mean, the whole time that we had to deal with him. I think the biggest thing that I've learned throughout a lot of the transactions that we've had, and even now, a lot of the things that I ask myself in the beginning now is that person really listening to me? Because you can tell
Yeah.
when somebody's listening to you and when somebody is not.
Yeah.
So as soon as I get that feeling of like, this person, I can see their brain, their thought process is all over the place. They're not really connecting the words that I'm telling them about what we need to do. So that immediately poses a problem. And that's when I now I've taken into account that I need to step back, and maybe I'm just, kind of throwing too much information out, and maybe I need to do it in smaller steps so that and I get it. They need that kind of like compartmentalization,
Right.
so that they're able to make the decisions as needed, because they do have so much going on.
Yeah.
So they're trying to keep themselves alive and survive and figure this whole situation out. And with him, especially, he had just gotten out of prison. He was definitely on drugs. There were many times where I would say, I know you're high, so I'm just gonna wait around for you to like calm down, and then we can talk again.
Yeah.
And he understood, and he didn't say anything. Like he wouldn't before he used to kind of huff and puff about it, but then he's like, okay, he kind of felt dumb, I think. But he hadn't seen his mom since he had gotten out of prison, and she had this major surgery. The whole thing was, it was really hard, and hard to communicate with him, and hard to communicate what he was going to have to communicate with his mom after not seeing her or talking to her for months.
Right.
That, that we were selling, he was selling the condo in order to get on with his life and her life.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that was, but again, in the beginning, it's just they don't listen. They're like completely different space.
Right.
If they don't listen, if somebody's not listening to you, period, I think in any aspect of life, there's a problem.
Yeah.
And you're not going to get anywhere from there.
Absolutely. Yeah. So for me now, that's a huge red flag, because this guy was, and so he was worse with me because personality wise we clash, and that was another red flag. I'm kind of like, no nonsense, let's get the business done. And I can be sympathetic and all of those things, and I can hear you out when there's a problem, but I only have so much patience for like nonsense. If you're going to no-show appointments and things like that, I lay down the law pretty quickly. And with someone of his personality type, all he did when I laid down the law was push back. So there was no way that we were going to come to agreement. We were not going to be able to work with each other because he wasn't, he felt, I guess, disrespected or something by me saying, this is how it's going to be. And I felt disrespected because I was like, you don't just get to waste all my time and I have to reschedule everything like multiple days in a row in order to try to get this transaction done that at the end of the day is helping you. You're going to walk away here with money, and you're going to walk away with a clean slate. And there were a lot of issues with that condo as well. It was in really bad condition. So they were also washing their hands of a lot of maintenance problems. And, in order to make that place livable for their mom, the amount of work that would have had to be done was insane. So so my perspective was, I'm taking all of this off your plate, and the least you can do is meet me to sign a piece of paper on time when you say you're going to.
Right.
So big old red flag there for me. The first time that he pushed back, I should have probably reconsidered the entire deal and at that point said, if we can't come to an agreement on how we're going to meet to get things done, then, I need to cancel this contract now because I don't have time for it.
Yeah.
And I did not do that. So I did a really bad job qualifying this particular seller. And, you guys are going to run into situations like this where it's not super black and white. You're not always going to be dealing with who you think you'll be dealing with. When we initially made contact, because this was the mom's condo, we think that that's who we're going to be speaking with. And exactly. We think that that's who's going to be in charge of the transaction. And then what we come to find out later, because she's got health issues and because of her particular situation, and what she was going through, her kids had to take it over. So, that's a part of the qualifying process too. When you find out that there's going to be like a go-between that's going to have to go tell somebody information and then come back and give you information, that's another piece of the puzzle for qualification. Like, is that person going to be good at doing that? Because this guy wasn't.
I know. It was, it's and again, that's what I mean when you have to kind of give the information in like little bits and pieces. And although it might take a little longer, it might be easier for them so that they don't feel so overwhelmed by the whole thing. But I remember we had to pick them up and take them to different, because it wasn't only her mom that was on that title, his mom that was on the title, it was his uncle as well.
Yes.
And then another uncle out of the state, like somewhere. And I remember talking to them, and they just wanted to do away with everything. They didn't want to have any contact with them, which I get now. because that was, wow.
Yeah.
They didn't want any part of the family. And it's sad. I mean, because you run into these situations where I think the biggest thing is that they don't feel that they're being heard a lot of the times. And that's why they get on the defensive right away. And they feel like that somebody else is going to take advantage of them.
Right.
Or that, we're not really comprehending where they're coming from. It was hilarious. Now I laugh about it. The day that we had to drive him around to get everybody's signature was insane. He started off super high also. I remember he was in my car and we were all, Henrik, myself, because we needed a man with us. Kim at the time was with us because she had to notarize the signatures. And he was sweating buckets in the backseat of my car. And we're like, you decided to pop something before we did this? Like, what are you doing? It's just incredible the kinds of things that happen, even though as much information you give them and you try to prep them as good as you can.
Yeah. And so would you agree then that it varies person to person? Because had this been, a lead that was in your inbox that they had contacted you from the beginning, this may have worked out a little bit differently because you had a different experience with him than I did.
Go ahead. Didn't mean to interrupt you.
Well, so I'm just, one of the things that I'm trying to get across to the audience is that you have to know about your own sort of like what is your personality type, what can you deal with and not deal with, what frustrates you, and what kinds of things do you absolutely know that are going to set you off when you're trying to get a transaction done, and those factors need to come into play with the qualification process, right? Because now had I gone to pick him up that day and he had popped something and he wants to sit in my car and then, be acting however he's acting, like, so that doesn't work for me.
Right.
That does not work for me. I don't do unpredictable behavior. Unpredictable behavior, which is often, unfortunately, something that addicts project out there, is something that I don't have an easy time dealing with. And so had that been me, I would have said, we're not doing this today. You are not getting in my car because I don't know how you're going to act for the next several hours. And that's a deal breaker for me.
You have to know your strong suits. Like, you really do have to know, should you need to go into CPR mode, that you know how to do CPR.
Right.
That's pretty much kind of how I look at it. I know myself, and I know that I have a lot of patience, to a certain extent, of course. Obviously, I also knew that he wasn't a bad person. Like, I knew that he didn't have it in him to like act out or anything. We knew it as soon as we picked him up, and I told him, I'm like, pull it together. I don't know what you need to do right now. I'm gonna get you some water, but you need to pull it together because this is the only day that we have.
Yeah.
And he did. I don't know what. We did have to drive from one end of the city to the other, which I think gave him enough time to like settle down. But it was weird there for a second, and I didn't know if we were gonna have to stop and like let him, do whatever he needed to do or drop him back off, or I don't, but again, we were on limited time. And I think you do kind of have to ask yourself, how do I deal with you in these certain situations? If I feel at all that I'm not going to be able to do this or follow through with it because of my sanity or my safety, then you need to call in your troops, like your reserves. So I know that if I'm having a hard time with a seller and I need a male influence, I'm going to call one of the guys.
Yeah.
And have them come, same thing. Or if I just need good cop, bad cop kind of thing, I know that I'm gonna have to ask for help. But I think it takes a couple of deals for you to for you to understand kind of how do you pivot and how do you work these things, because not everybody is gonna be easy to work with.
Yes. And so you have to have resources. I had you as a resource. I went, look, I can't deal with this guy. Every time we get on the phone, we get in an argument. It was to the point where he wouldn't call or text me back. And,
Right.
and so, it was, hey, we're partway through this. I would like to get this done because it's the right thing to do. Can you step in and help me? And you did. So you have to have those resources. But now that we're talking about this, I'm seeing so many layers of things to address within the qualification process, because here's another thing. So I gotta tell you, I don't know if this is just unique to our business and the leads that we work, or if this is something that happens frequently with real estate investing altogether. But I feel that you and I have dealt with a lot of issues with drugs specifically, right?
Yes.
And so that brings on a whole nother layer of things, because, like, for instance, when you guys were taking this seller, or I guess he was actually a fiduciary for the seller, technically speaking, when you guys were taking him around this one day, it was actually to get signatures from family members that needed to sign waivers for title work, so that we could remove them from title, and the property could be sold. And it was not him, luckily, that had to sign paperwork, because we can't have somebody sign paperwork if we know they're high. We can't do that.
Right.
So that poses a whole entire another layer of problems, because if you know that you are dealing with someone, so I had a different deal where I knew that this person also was a pretty severe alcoholic and drug addict. And the deal was, in order for her to be able to legally sign anything, she had to be sober. So all of our meetings had to be at like 8 a.m. before she started drinking, because the instant that we would finish a meeting, she would walk across the street to Circle K and buy alcohol. And that was her morning ritual. So we had to know that, like, hey, we can't, legally speaking, we can't have you signing anything when you're under the influence of something.
Yeah.
You need to be able to read it. You need to be able to understand it. You need to be able to have a conversation with us, telling us that you understand what it is that, what paperwork we're looking at right now. And so that's another thing with the qualification process. I am now to the point in my career where if I see that red flag, I'm walking away and letting somebody else have that deal, because I've done so many of those and they've been so frustrating that I just no longer want to work with that clientele. It doesn't mean that I don't have sympathy for their situation or think that they deserve help, because they do. It's just that I've reached some burnout on dealing with the client that has those particular red flags.
Well, yeah, because it's like you have to convince somebody to do something out of their normal.
Right.
And it's hard to do that. It's not their daily routine, so it disrupts it. And once it's disrupted, then
yes,
all hell can break loose. Yeah.
And if their normal is, I do everything while I'm drunk, or I do everything while I'm high, why can't I also do this? Explaining to them that this is a legal liability. That's not something that's necessarily like inside their values that they care about, because they do life a certain way. And we can't do things that way, because we have a legal responsibility as business owners to make sure that they're doing things with sound mind. And so even just having that conversation can be really, really difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, a lot of it, to kind of look at all of this in a I shouldn't say in a bigger picture, but as you're looking over it and you have something come your way, I think the very first thing is kind of, and as soon as you have that conversation, like Lisa said, if this person is being in any way defensive or combative, then you really got to think about what it's going to be like for the rest of the time that you're going to be dealing with this.
Yes.
And we also know that most of these deals take about, everybody's like, oh, 2 weeks, it can be super fast. The worse the person is, the longer it takes. So I always say it takes about a month for all of this to kind of come to fruition. And I don't know if you want to deal with somebody like that for 3 weeks or to a month. I know that, I mean, we're busier, so I don't have the time to babysit
Right.
a whole lot.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's something to take into consideration. You make a fabulous point. If that person is combative from the beginning and they are clear that they don't really want to help themselves, because when someone comes to you and says, you're an expert in this field, so I need your help with this, but they're willing to represent their end, very different than I need help, so I'm going to go over here and bury my head in the sand because I'm very stressed out, so I'm not going to cooperate, and I'm going to hope that you do everything for me, because there's no way to do that effectively in a real estate transaction. So I feel like that's one of the big qualifiers from the beginning. Is this person also willing to help themselves? Are they willing to show up to appointments on time? Are they willing to allow you access to the things you need access to? I've been in a situation with several sellers where they said, I want to sell the house, but I can't let you in the house.
Right.
Well, I can't do that, unless you want to sell it for, an absolutely bottom of the barrel price, because at that point, from us, for a business standpoint, right, we have to assume that all of the things that can go wrong with the house will, if we can't see it, to actually see what the condition of the house is. So if we're in that position, it's harder for us to give a fair offer. But if the seller can't get past, I don't want you in the house, there's not a lot we can do there, right?
No. And I don't want to, I won't buy a property without looking at it.
Right.
Just, no.
Right. So there's a lot of things that come into play here with the initial behavior when you're having those first, conversations about what is this going to look like and what kind of options can I offer you? And I think that it's really valuable also for people to know that if you walk away from a deal initially, it doesn't necessarily mean that that seller isn't going to come back later. So I had a deal that was actually, it was a judicial foreclosure. So it was still on a timeline, but quite a bit longer timeline. And I approached the seller fairly early on in the process and said, look, this is what's going on. I can discuss some options with you. And he flipped out. So in his mind at this point, everyone was the enemy, including me. So I was trying to offer some options, but he was really upset. And, so he basically told me, go F myself. It literally told me that, and then slammed the door. And I was like, okay. This was at the point in time where door knocking was still our sort of main marketing strategy, or reaching out to leads. So I said, you know what, that's fine. He clearly doesn't want any help or information right now. And I just watched it, and I watched it go through the court system, and it kept going and kept going and kept going. And then it finally got to the end stages where they were auctioning the house. And so I thought, well, you know what, I'm just going to send him a quick letter and say, look, this is where you're at this point. You have this much time to solve the problem. I'm just letting you know out of courtesy. And that was really all that I said. I got a phone call back from him, acting like he was so very polite. When he called me, may I please speak to Miss Even, as though he thought that I wasn't going to remember what he told me. I remembered, but I let it go. Because clearly he had changed his attitude, and now he was willing to have a conversation, because circumstances had changed, right? And he was willing to have a conversation politely, and he was willing to listen to what I had to say. And we actually did the transaction, and we purchased that property and it went fine.
Yeah.
So sometimes people need a little bit of time to think things through and figure out where they're at. And you're going to get people that are going to lash out at you regardless.
Yeah,
Because they're in a
absolutely.
stressful situation. If you're working the type of leads that we are, if you're working with people in foreclosure, you're going to find that not everyone is going to be easy to deal with or open to information. And that's just kind of how it is. But you can open the door, say, here is the information. You can always contact me later, and just let them sit with it. And that sometimes can take care of the qualification process itself.
Right, exactly. I do think it just depends on the two things I think to remember is, are they do they listen the initial conversation? Are they listening? And are they forthcoming with the information also?
Yeah,
Because obviously, and because we do have to provide some sort of a solution, right? And there are options and all of that, but are they really telling you all of the information?
right.
Um, and that's a good instance with you with this particular one where they get super defensive at the beginning because they're not really willing to listen to the information that you already know, the information they also have but are embarrassed about it. So it's like this whole, they've put themselves through the ringer trying to figure out how to work it all out to their benefit, when in the end we have their best interest at heart. That's just who we are, I think, as people. So it takes them a little while.
Yeah,
It does take a little while.
yeah,
But yeah, once I and it's up to you if you are out there and you're starting this, or maybe you're in the midst of it and you're wondering like, oh, why am I still dealing with these really, combative, that's the best word that I can think of, combative people. Like, what is that the kind of seller that you really want to deal with?
yes,
You. Everybody has their own qualification process, but I think the biggest things to take from this is the listening and the forthcoming and doing and giving you the information that you need.
absolutely. I would agree. And I think that both of us have been in the position where now that we've been doing this as long as we have, um, we've sort of we've added to our list of qualifications of who we do and don't want to work with
Mhm.
anymore, right? Um,
Yeah.
I know, so Angie and I have just had conversations about really difficult deals where, we've talked about this is not, now that, now that I've seen how this played out when I saw these things in the beginning, if I see this again, this is, I'm going to choose not to participate in a deal like that.
Right.
And over time, we have decided that we would rather do fewer volume of deals, but do deals that transact easier and that are less stressful overall, rather than do a higher volume of deals, but have a certain number of those that we know are going to be really difficult and we're going to try to force them anyway. Um,
Right.
for a number of reasons, but over time, we've been able to sort of change the way that that we've chosen to do things.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just, you get to a certain point where, and granted, there's some folks out there that do really, really well doing some really difficult deals, and that's awesome. And I'm not, we're not saying that we would never do that again, but I think the first choice is definitely those that want to actually work with
Yeah,
us. Yeah.
absolutely. So let's do a rundown of a few things that we think people should look out for when you're looking to qualify a seller. So combativeness right off
Right.
the bat. If somebody's difficult right out the gate and they aren't forthcoming in their communication, or they're just resistant, red flag, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's see what else. So obviously, if you're dealing with somebody who is using, this is another red flag for like a million reasons.
Yeah. Like
Because
in all, yeah, if somebody is in under the influence in whatever kind of substance, you have to watch out for how you work with that person. And on the legal side of things, you have to be really careful.
Yes.
Because they can't, I mean, somebody can come back and say, I don't remember doing that, or you saying that, that sort of thing. Has to be really careful
Yeah.
with that.
Yeah. So that's a big red flag. Not listening, just like Angie said. If you're dealing, now some people are stubborn and they don't necessarily believe what you're telling them because it might be new information that they don't understand. You're an industry professional, so you see this all day, every day, and you know exactly how things work. And people who just own a home may not have had to see any of this before.
Right. They don't know.
Yeah, if they haven't had the experience, they don't really know what they're dealing with. And so I would expect a certain level of potential stubbornness just because it's new.
Exactly.
But there's balance there. If someone is not willing to listen to anything you say, or if they're convinced that everything is a lie or everything is a scam or everything is somehow set up to hurt them in some way or take advantage of them in some way, that's a huge red flag. It's not likely that that's going to be very much worth your time. And again, there's liability stuff here too. If someone from the get-go is wanting to be convinced that what you're doing has to be a scam, do you want the liability of dealing with that person?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's not worth it.
Yeah. So that's a huge red flag. And then honesty and whether or not they're forthcoming with the information you need, because you will come across the seller that says, absolutely, I really need to get rid of this property, there's all these problems, and then they either have an excuse or resistance for everything you need them to do. If it's if it's the title company needs you to send them XYZ piece of paper and they say, why should I have to do that? Some people are just indignant. Why should I have to do that? I don't want to be inconvenienced. Other people may get caught up in the stress of, I don't know how to get that piece of paper. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. And, some people are willing to let you walk them through the process. If they need to go to county records and get something and you say, this is how you do it. And, and they're willing to follow through, that's great. If they're not willing to do anything and they say, well, no, you're buying the house, you do it, red flag.
Yeah, I think that's something that you kind of have to, again, I mean, it's up to you, but I would see it as a red flag.
Yeah. Because so there's a spectrum. There's a spectrum, right? There's the people that once you explain to them, because Angie's been saying this all along, that once you explain to them in detail what it is that needs to happen and why it needs to happen, sometimes then it clicks and they go, okay, I understand, I'm willing to do that. And some people just want their problems to go away, but they don't want to do anything to actually make the problem go away, especially if there's any complexity whatsoever. And you're also going to deal with people who, for reasons that you won't know. I mean, I've had sellers that were just averse to things that I thought were strange, because to me it's such a typical, obviously, like, you need an ID to do any kind of transaction like this. It's always strange to me when people are like, I don't want you to see my ID, or I'm not going to let the title company take a copy of my ID. I can't tell you why some people feel the way that they do about that, but
that's a little weird. But
yeah, but at some point you need to be willing to say to them, this is the only legal way to do this transaction. And if you're not willing to follow the rules, then there's not a lot that I can do to help you. It has to be, there has to be some give and take on both sides. So, you're likely to run into all different kinds of things like this.
Absolutely.
And then, like I said in the beginning too, personality type, whether or not you can get along with a seller. I would make the argument, because of where I am personally in my business, that if I come across a seller that is, so I've dealt with a few sellers who were pretty rough around the edges, and their demeanor was to insult people because it entertained them. I won't do business with people like that anymore, because it's just not worth it to me. If someone feels they need to be abusive, to other people, especially because it's not just me in the transaction that they're dealing with. We're going to have an escrow officer that they may need to be in contact with. We may have an administrative person that's helping with our business that might need to contact them for different things. I may not be the only person that they're talking to. And so if they go and cause a problem for me with these other people, obviously I don't want a seller to hurt my reputation with my escrow agent that I've worked so hard to build, because they're being obnoxious, and the escrow agent goes, I don't want to take your files anymore because of the people that you're working with. Those are things to be aware of.
Yeah, absolutely. Or it's the whole, I think it just comes down to the personality and willing to take direction and to be able to listen.
Absolutely.
And that's really all of it. I mean, there's also time when you have to deal with other family members, and then they get nasty with each other. That's really uncomfortable too. And I don't like to be in the middle of things.
Yeah.
Things just need to be pretty just clean and set. This is how we're going to do it. This is how it works. And we're all in agreement. We all have our to-do list, and we do it.
Yeah.
Few and far between, like, for those to happen. But when they do, it's such a difference. And once you get that kind of an experience where it's so easy, you start to kind of let go of some of these other more complicated, personality type emotional deals.
Yeah.
I guess I would call them.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, no, for the most part, I think it's just, you just really have to ask yourself, how far do you want to take this? How far are you willing to be stretched emotionally and professionally?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And I don't think this gets spoken about very much when people are talking about how to be a wholesaler or how to be a real estate investor. You hear a lot about motivation and hustle, but you don't hear a whole lot of people talk about how the business is going to affect you, either from a stress standpoint or from an emotional standpoint. Because I can tell you from experience, and I know that Angie can tell you too, if you're juggling several deals that are stressful at one time with a whole bunch of really difficult people involved, you are not going to be enjoying what you're doing. Not only are you not going to be enjoying what you're doing, but it's going to feel like, why did I get myself in the middle of this mess? And that's something to consider, in your business. I mean, most people go into business for themselves because they want some kind of freedom, or they want something that they're not getting. A lot of people are stressed in a regular 9-to-5 job. And if you're looking to offload stress, this is something to consider in your business. What kind of people you're dealing with is going to be directly related to what your stress levels are on a daily basis.
Absolutely. And that goes with anything, I think, too. Even if you just have a regular job kind of thing, it's just how far you're willing to stress yourself out, basically.
Right.
Yeah. But no, it's just it doesn't make you a happy person. You can tell. And I know that when we've been in these situations when there's a few that we're working, and it's just trying to get everything done, it does take a toll on you, and people can tell.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. If you want to walk around like that, by all means, like, all power to you. Personally, I don't think I think I'm too old for that.
Yeah, it's not worth it anymore for me either. There was a point in time where it felt like a big victory or a big accomplishment to get through a really difficult deal working with really difficult people. And since I've done that a good number of times now, I'm done with that. I'm good. I had the experience.
Exactly.
I understand how to make it happen.
Yep. And not to say like we wouldn't absolutely, if there's a deal and the numbers work, by all means. But yeah, it's just, you just gotta kind of choose.
Yeah.
That's the whole thing about everything that you do, your choices and what you choose to do.
Absolutely. So Angie, do you have any specific qualifiers or specific red flags if you're like, if I see this, I'm immediately out?
I think the only one where if I see that they're hiding something now, because although we get the title report or whatever, and we kind of figure it out anyways, but if in the beginning they're not forthcoming with information, then I don't want to pull teeth to get something done.
Right.
Either you're gonna do it or you're not. So if you're giving me any kind of a resistance and you're not being if you're being shady about the information, no, then we're good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
that's the only one.
There's something to be said, right? There's a big difference between this is my area of expertise and I can help you with options if you're open to it, and dragging someone kicking and screaming into a clean slate, right? It's not necessarily worthwhile to try to do that.
No.
So let me think here.
Is there one for you? Yeah.
I think one that I started to pay attention to also, and you mentioned this real briefly, was the number of like family members that are involved, or it may not even be family members. If there's multiple people on title, and that's going to be really difficult in order to clear title. Those are big red flags to me, because I have to say that I have yet to see a real estate deal where there were more than two people on title and someone didn't disagree with someone else. And it wasn't just a major messy negotiation to get someone to sign off on what they needed to do in order to sell the property. Money or the perception of money makes people do weird things. So you might have someone who is on title for totally wonky reasons, and they haven't even seen that property in 30 years. But the minute they think someone else is going to make money off of it, all of a sudden they want to get in the way, and they want to make it difficult. And
right.
So yeah, that's a red flag for me. Because again, if it's a really, really smoking deal and there's a ton of equity, so I can make sure that everyone gets to walk away with something and everyone is happy.
That's great.
Yeah. And, that can be a win all the way around. Mm-hmm. But if I'm looking at a lot of difficulties and this is just one piece of it, and especially if someone else that I'm already in contact with has warned me that this person is going to be difficult, that might be something at this point where I go, I don't know if I want to get in the middle of that.
Right, exactly. There's no time. Time is currency to me. So if it's going to take too much of my time, then no.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, no, I totally get it. And trying to convince people, that's the other thing. So if it's so many errors, I dealt one with recently, but they were all in agreement, which was like an anomaly. But no, some people get really, really envious and just do everything in their power so that it does not happen, so that other person doesn't get anything from it, which is horrible. Yeah. Families are really, really weird sometimes. They're dynamic
stuff.
Yeah.
Complicated stuff. And I would say too that, I know we talk a lot about, the lead source that Angie and I are used to and that we work within the most is foreclosure. And so I understand that has its own unique set of
Mhm.
circumstances attached to it. But I still think that this information is relevant even to people who are not necessarily working foreclosure leads, because you can have other types of distress. If you're working a vacant list, man, I got to tell you, I have talked to a number of potential sellers that are very, how do I want to say this? They really don't understand how real estate works. And they assume that the longer they hold on to a property, the more valuable it becomes. And that's just not always the case. Um,
Yeah.
so sometimes those sellers are going to be difficult as well. There may not be the time sensitivity involved that there is for a foreclosure, and there may not be the same type of distress as you see in foreclosures. But you might be trying to talk to someone who's had a property that's been vacant for the last 15 years, and the thing is falling apart. And they're going to insist that if they hold it for another 5 years, it's just going to be worth more money. And there's no guarantee that that's going to be the case.
Yeah, no.
So I think that the qualification process for sellers can be for any type of lead that you might be working.
Yeah.
You work probates, right, Angie? If you work probates,
Mhm.
you're going to run into the situation with multiple heirs potentially that we were just talking about. And so you
Yeah.
may have difficulty there. If you're driving for dollars, or doing like city violation type stuff, the same thing. So I don't necessarily think that there has to be a huge amount of distress in order for you to have to sort of look at your clientele and say, is this person going to be a good quality seller to work with?
Right.
I think
Yeah.
that's going to come with every deal.
Absolutely. And it's just human nature. It's who you want to do business with.
Absolutely.
And are you willing to, are you willing to stretch yourself and to what end?
Right.
To be able to deal with it. Yeah.
Right. And it's important. So you said, who do you want to do business with? It's important, I think, especially for people newer in the industry, to understand that when when this is, where you're working on a business transaction, you need to kind of look at your seller the same way that you would look at potential business partners. The same way, if you're a wholesaler, that you're going to be looking at potential buyers that you're going to be assigning to. When you're looking at all of the people that you're going to have in the chain of your transactional business, you're hoping to work with people who are cooperative, right? That's sort of the point. That's how you get these transactions done, because you need a team in order to get these transactions done. It's important to look at that seller as a part of your team and to make a determination about, can I get this seller on board to be cooperative, to be reciprocal, to give me the things that I need and the things that they need in order to get the transaction done. Because if you're looking at everybody else as part of your team, and you're coming from the perception of you have to work with every single seller, you'll definitely run into these situations with red flags where partway through you're going to feel like you should have never gotten into this transaction.
Yeah. If you do, and then you just, there are times where you just walk away or like, I'm done, like right. Later. And that's bad too. Like it's just not good. Then it's just worse for that seller too, because now they think that everybody's like that, so they're not willing to work with anybody else. So yeah, it's just, you gotta have to, I mean, if you're great at working in those stressful situations and that's what you like, awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. But
sure.
Yeah, but definitely I think you just have to find your niche. Mm-hmm. Once you find that, or who you want to work with. And it is a team, definitely a team. Everybody, your escrow officer, your buyer, if there's a buyer, or if you're going to flip it, that whole other team too. So yeah, it's just a whole thing you have to look at. Yeah.
So I hope that this was helpful, valuable information for everyone. We have found that it's valuable, as colleagues, to talk about this and make decisions, about how we're going to move forward in our business. So we thought we would bring that information to the audience as well.
Yeah.
In other news, we are still trying to give away a $25 Amazon gift card.
I know it's funny.
People to tell us about their first wholesale deal.
People liked it, and I was just like, I'm like, is anybody going to share? You know, I think sometimes it is it is a little, intimidating, maybe. Maybe we'll change the question. I don't know. We'll see. But it's still there. I mean, if somebody wants to comment, by all means.
Still available. Yeah. So if you want to go tell us about your first wholesale deal, at this point, since like almost no one is interested, I mean, like shoe in
I'm gonna use it
to get an Amazon gift card. And I know everybody's ordering off Amazon right now because I am.
Exactly. A lot of us are. Yeah. I'm like, so maybe I'll go share mine. No, we already shared ours.
Yes.
So we'll see. We'll see who else.
Yeah. So we'll see if we can't get some answers there. We will just assume that you guys were just totally not interested in that question. We will come up with something that is maybe more fun for you. We will try.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Absolutely. Cool.
Awesome. So thank you, everybody who was watching live. Appreciate you very much. Anyone who wasn't able to, please catch us on the replay. It will be up on our page, and probably Angie's and my individual pages as well. So you'll be able to find us.
Yes.
And
definitely
be back Thursday.
Absolutely. And we'll figure out what to talk about. Actually, I just had an idea, so I'll have to I'll talk to you about it privately.
Perfect. All right.
All right.
With a plan.
Bye, guys. Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Have a good one.